So in this video, we're going to look at how to do staging inside of Kerbal Space Program. So here we are now in the vehicle assembly building. We're going to go ahead, construct a first stage for us. So put a couple fuel tanks on here. All right. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a separation point. So let's say we want the first stage of the rocket just to be these three pieces, and we want to separate on this top. Now we have a couple ways we can do this. We could make a adapter of some type if we wanted to have a different size, or we could go ahead and stay with the same size rocket all the way up. Let's go ahead and make an adapter here. All right. So we can put our adapter in. You can put in a lot of different adapters. Some are angled, some are slanted here. Some are straight up. You can decide what you want to do here. And the important thing to remember is what our diameter is. So down here, we had a larger diameter, and the adapter we used, if you hover on it, it says it adapts to a 2.5 meter adapter. So we're going to go ahead and put in a separation point, and the separation point we put in, we want to be 2.5 meters. So let's go ahead and look at our coupling tab right here. We're going to find a decoupler. See how it says 25 decoupler? That means 2.5 meters. I'm going to go ahead and select that. We'll sit it on top. And then we can go ahead and add our second stage on top of this. Now remember, if we're adding a second stage, we need to make sure that we have an engine for our second stage. So we'll go ahead and pick one. Notice it automatically puts it inside of a fairing. And we'll put a couple fuel tanks on there too. That'll work. Okay, now we have a first stage, we have separation point, we have a second stage. I'm going to go ahead and throw a command pod on top, and oh, you know what? We're going to have a command pod. Let's go ahead and look at reentry. So let's put another separation point here and a heat shield in. So we're still at 2.5 meters diameter, and heat shield would be under thermal, and I'll find the 2.5 meter heat shield. Notice I want to make sure it's above the separation point, otherwise when I separate it will fall off. And since we have a command pod, let's make sure we also put a parachute on there. A couple of things to note about parachutes. See the ones that are blue and the ones that are orange. We kind of have this color coding. The orange ones are just drag chutes. They can be activated at higher speeds, but they're not actually going to be effective enough to stop you. So we'll go ahead and put a regular parachute on here. All right. So we've got a pretty straightforward two-stage rocket. We have the first stage fires with this rocket engine. We separate right about here. We have the next rocket engine fire burning this fuel tank, and then we'll separate on the top, and take the command pod and release the parachute. Now, the biggest problem here is that despite how we build it, Kerbal Space Program kind of messes up the staging. So over here, we actually have our stages. Now, as we look at this, we would consider this to be 2 stages. They actually break a stage down for every particular event. So something like deploying parachutes or this last step separation, even though there's not an engine, they would consider to be a separate stage. So we have to put these in order manually because they don't do a very good job of it. It actually will start with the highest number stage. This is what will happen first. And if we launch this right now, the first thing that we did when we hit the spacebar will be to deploy the parachute, which of course we don't want. So the first thing we want is this engine. The easiest way to do this is to note that if I highlight the engine over here, we get an outline around the icon, or if I hover over the icon, it conversely highlights the engine here. So we want that to be first. I can actually just drag that down. Next thing I want is this separation. These are the separation symbols. Notice they're both serial separations. So I need to find which one I want, and it's this one. So we'll have that go next. We can also put more than one thing in a stage if we want. So if you wanted it to separate and automatically start the upper stage engine, I can drag this icon and put it in here also. So it will separate and start that engine. It's up to you whether you want to make them 2 separate steps or not. The big difference is like this, you click the spacebar once, and if the previous engine was firing, the second stage engine will continue to fire at that power. If you make them separate stages, you click once to separate and then once to fire the engine. So it's not really a big deal. Then we'll look at our system here. We have the main engine fire, and then when it burns out, we'll separate and fire the next engine. And the next thing we want to do is separate for our capsule. So this will come down here. Now after the capsule separates and we're coming back into the atmosphere, we'll want to release the parachute, which is there. All right. Once you've done this, you want to save it. Before you launch it. But that's the basic idea of how to create a multi-stage rocket and be able to control when the stages start and stop and how to separate it.